Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Triple Play, that podcast where it doesn't matter what happened or why, because this month we watched the Predator trilogy.
Written by Jim Thomas, John Thomas, Alex Litvak, and Michael Finch.
Directed by John McTiernan, Stephen Hopkins, and Nimrod Antal.
And released in 1987, 1990, and 2010.
Yeah. The first three Predator movies. We didn't watch the fourth one yet. With a question
mark.
It's
not out yet. So we need to go to special viewings to watch it now.
Yeah, so it should be obvious why we watched the Predator trilogy here. It's to capitalize on the new Predator movie. Usually we start with how many times we've watched these, and I haven't watched these at all before this podcast.
Yep, zero. So. I didn't know what these movies were. I knew almost nothing about them. I didn't even know what the Predator looked like until like a week before I watched the movie. The first one, that is.
These are seminal 80s action classics, even though only one of them was made in the 80s.
Yeah, when I was looking stuff up for this, and I knew these movies were famous, so when I was looking stuff up for this, I was, you always hear these things like, man, this is still such a phenomenon. Predator is such like a cultural icon. People know what it looks like, and it's so famous. And I was like, I didn't know any of that. I didn't even know what the thing looked like.
Wow. Honestly, I'm more impressed about that than anything in these movies.
Yeah, because, the trilogy itself wasn't great. Like, the first one was pretty good, and that's pretty much... The second one was bad. The third one was a little better. The third one was bad. We'll get into this later, but I think we actually, when we were sitting down and watching the third one, I think we were giving it more credit than it was due because we had watched the second one right before that, and we're like, yeah, this is better than that one.
Well, it is.
But I think if you just watch that movie like by itself, you'd be like, man, this really sucks. Whereas when we watched it, we were like, man, this just kind of sucks.
I guess it would depend how big of a Predator fan you are. Yeah, if they had made a third Alien versus Predator movie, we'd watch that trilogy next, but they didn't, so that's not a trilogy.
Yeah, well, you could be a huge Predator fan and hate the second and third one for destroying a franchise that you really like, or you could just love all of them, who knows?
We could read those spin-off novels that tell more Predator stories that aren't the movies, I guess.
Yeah, those sound good.
One of them was written by this author whose name I actually recognize. I'm going to pull it up now.
Right. I don't know why we're getting into this here, since we usually do this at the end. But
I only wanted to bring up Jeff Vandermeer because he wrote the Annihilation trilogy. The first book just got turned into a movie this year, actually, the very beginning of this year.
Right.
So there's your weird present-day connection.
Well, in terms of how the Predator movies were written, they weren't really based on anything except...
Well, a joke. They were based on a joke.
A joke and an idea by Jim and, John Thomas brothers. First script, and you can tell.
Because they didn't get any better for Predator 2.
Well, Predator 2 was like their second... I think it was their second. It was again, it only came out 3 years after the first one, so it was also a very early script for them. Also pretty not good.
Yeah, well, you can tell.
Not improved very much. Yeah, you can tell.
Well,
the actors weren't, doing it any favors either. They weren't really improving it either. They weren't doing a great job either, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, the third one the script wasn't really that much better.
No, yeah, it was a different
especially
duo.
when it was doesn't matter what happened or why.
Yeah, that's where our intro came from. There's a line in the third one where
we're gonna get there.
The quote unquote, it's an ensemble cast, but like the main guy
character
is like, they're trying to figure out what happens, and he goes, "It doesn't matter what happened or why," when that's like literally the entire crux of everything in the movie so far. But yeah, we'll get to the many problems of the third one.
Yeah, well, so the first one, like we said,
in front of the scenes,
it was based on a joke because someone was like, "Hey man, Rocky's fought like all these people. He's fought the Russian Ivan Drago. He's fought Mr. T. He's fought Apollo Creed." And he's like, "Well, who do we fight next?" And someone was like, "He could fight an alien." But then they're like, "But we could turn that into an actual movie."
But here's the thing: there's, and this is the case for a lot of stories with this first movie, is that accounts differ. There's not really much of a consensus as to what happened or why.
Yeah, but I feel like we should retell the story because it's funny.
Sure, we should, and because this is one account, and this is actually, I think, an account from Jim and John Thomas themselves. Even though they've given other accounts where they're like, yeah, we've always had this idea in mind. We've always liked The Most Dangerous Game. We've always had this idea of what if an alien came to Earth and hunted us like we hunt animals.
And I mean, it's a pretty good premise to start off with.
Yeah.
That's not to say it makes for a good script.
No, I mean, movie. I forget who it was, but one crew member was like, this is a script or a concept where, they come up with it and they're like, man, why didn't I think of that? Like, it's so simple and it can go so many directions. And this is where they took it.
Well, the first movie they took it in a pretty good direction.
The first movie they did.
Because the first movie they really drove home that Most Dangerous Game things. They're in the jungle.
Right.
And apparently it was filmed in Mexico.
Southern Mexico.
On the border with Guatemala.
And here's the thing, when you're watching the first one, you're like, man, I wonder where this is. In the movie, it's in Central America. And you're like, man, I wonder if this actually is Central America. And yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
And they have apparently had a really hard time making the movie just in general, in terms of the location and just other stuff in general.
Well,
we can start with casting.
Yeah, we usually start with casting. So they cast Arnold. Well, I read, allegedly, that they always had Arnold in mind for the lead role. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't really know, because I read some other differing accounts that said they found Arnold later on, so...
Yeah, again, accounts differ. It's not much of a consensus.
What I did read was that Carl Weathers, who plays Dylan...
The CIA agent who's coming back to action.
Was cast specifically because he was like an actual noted actor at the time, because he just starred in Rocky as Apollo Creed.
Yeah. Well,
and they wanted an actual actor to cast against all these other people who, by the way, weren't actors. Yeah, we're going to get into that right now.
Well, a lot of these people, had been in movies and stuff, but they weren't necessarily like actors in the traditional sense that you might think of, like an actor who's either really talented, or they go to acting school, or they move to Hollywood and try to, quote unquote, make it and stuff like that. A lot of these people were martial artists, bodybuilders, athletes.
So Shane Black is in the first movie. He was just a screenwriter who had he wrote Lethal Weapon.
Right, and another interesting connection, one of the guys who produced Predators was in this as well.
Well, also Shane Black, who's in the first one, co-wrote and is directing The Predator, which is the new one. But he had just written Lethal Weapon, and Fox, accounts differ. Some people say that Fox cast him specifically in case they needed script rewrites. Shane Black himself says he convinced Fox to cast him in the movie because he thought it was such a good script, and he basically sold them on this idea that he could rewrite it if they needed rewrites.
Well, here McTiernan was like, first I wanted to call in Shane Black to touch up the script a little bit, and he was like, no, I'm not going to come down to wherever you guys are, Southern Mexico to do that. So they're like, oh, you can be on screen, you can be in the movie and stuff. And you're like, yeah, okay, all right. So he came down and they tried to get him to touch up the script, which apparently, I don't know if it's true, but supposedly, according to some people, he did a little bit to some extent.
Yeah. But accounts different, because again, I heard he didn't do any work on the script at all, and he just said it was a good script, and he was like, yeah, it's good stuff. Shane Black's a pretty good screenwriter, in my opinion. He wrote and directed a movie last year called 2 years ago, called The Nice Guys. Very good movie. He did Iron Man 3, which a lot of people dislike, but I think is the best of that era of Marvel movies.
Yeah, but some Marvel movies, it's a pretty low bar for being a good movie.
This is true, but Iron Man 3 does a lot of interesting things, I think, with the Tony Stark character. That it does a lot of interesting things that no other Marvel movie really had the balls to do.
It
deals with his crippling alcoholism.
Speaking of having the balls to do something, I was totally surprised in the third one where they actually were stranded on the planet at the end. That was the biggest shock in any of these movies. I did not think they were going to have the guts to do that.
Yes. Well, we're going to get there, but we're still on casting.
For the first one.
And they also cast Jesse Ventura, who was kind of an actor, but he's
really a jack of all trades. He's in the military. He's a WWE
superstar.
So, it was WWF, I think, back then.
Yeah, they hadn't.
But then the World Wildlife Foundation sued them, or something like that.
Well, so I read this interesting anecdote with that they actually sent all the people who played the commandos to like actual military training for like
Yeah.
3 weeks, I think it was, or maybe it was 2 months. And apparently everybody basically has struggled except for Jesse Ventura, who had actually been through military training because he was in the Navy. He was in the like underwater response team.
And the Marines, I think.
So he was just like, ha, this is a total cakewalk, and everyone else was struggling, and he was just like, this is so easy. Apparently he liked to tell that story later on. He was like, it's just a cakewalk for me. And they also cost, what's the guy's name now? The one who required a bodyguard to keep him away from everyone else.
Native American guy.
But the supposedly Native American guy,
Supposedly.
Sonny Landham. Well, they never say in the movie that he's Native American, so that's really...
Well, the actor is.
Okay, so...
Which doesn't mean the movie character is, but that's what I meant. That's what I meant when I said the Native American guy.
Okay, I get it. Okay. Yeah, Sonny Landham. Apparently, they had to hire a 6'5" bodyguard, not to like protect Sonny, but to protect apparently other people from Sonny.
This was in the official making of movie or documentary, so I don't know if you heard this, but apparently they went to some, I don't know, just some like nightclub type thing, just to relax or have fun during the making of this, and Sonny was just crawling on the floor, licking people's feet and legs.
What? Yeah, no wonder they had to hire a bodyguard.
Yeah, I mean, when Jesse Ventura was, and this is also from the making of documentary, Jesse Ventura was like, yeah, I could take any of these guys. This is when they're talking about the military training when they brought in the expert or whatever to train them. He was like, yeah, these guys are they're good guys. We're friends and they're actors, but these aren't really anyone I would put in actual combat situations. And then they just cut to this 2-second clip of Sonny being like, I completely disagree with that.
Well, I mean, that's a good segue into this practical joke that Arnold played on Jesse Ventura.
Yeah, I read about this as well.
This is a good one. I actually knew about... This was the one thing I knew about this movie before I even watched the movie, besides what the Predator looked like.
Such a small thing to know.
But apparently, the costuming department measured Jesse's biceps and said it was 1 inch bigger than Arnold's. And so Jesse went to Arnold and was like, hey, let's measure our biceps, and whoever's the biggest, the loser has to buy the winner a bottle of champagne. And they measured him, and Arnold won. Apparently, Arnold had told the costuming department to tell Jesse that his biceps were bigger so that he had come and challenge Arnold to this bicep-off, I guess. Which is also a good segue into the fact that apparently the actors would get up as early as 4 a.m. to work out before they started filming because they wanted their bodybuilder physique to look natural. And apparently they wanted to look extra jacked on set. So Carl Weathers at least would get up early, and if someone else was working out, he would just go get a cup of coffee and come back.
He was a little embarrassed to exercise in front of people for whatever reason.
Hey man, everybody's got their things.
Everybody has their own quirk.
Yeah, I don't think we should bash Carl for not wanting to work out in front of people.
No, I mean, maybe we shouldn't, but will we? I don't know either.
Well, I'm not going to.
I'm not going to either.
Okay, so we won't then. The answer is we won't. So that was something they did. Apparently, when they were on location, they had a lot of problems with
actually just making the movie in general.
With everything production related on set.
They were actually in deep forest.
Right.
They wanted to get an authentic location because the movie is supposed to take place in this untouched forest or a deep part of the forest where nobody really goes.
Well,
that's done realistically, right? They actually sort of did that.
Yeah, they actually went to the forest, but that caused a lot of problems. First and foremost was that apparently 2 weeks into filming, all the leaves started to fall off the trees. And apparently no one had told John McTiernan that the leaves would fall off the trees. So he started panicking because he would look at the film and it looked like they were just filming in a desolate, bombed out post-apocalyptic forest with no leaves. So they had to make fake leaves to put on all the trees, which apparently is part of the reason why the movie started to run really close to its production budget. So they had to make all these fake leaves to cover the trees. And apparently one of the reviews of the movie at the time were like, man, it really looks like those trees are fake.
Well, they didn't even just make fake leaves. They made fake trees. They made actual styrofoam plastic trees.
Yeah. Which, when you consider the fact that they're in the damn forest, is like...
Well, here's the thing. They also had these guys who were the designated leaf guys. I don't know if you heard about this. So after they, do multiple takes in an area, the leaves on the ground would get cleared. They'd get kicked out of the way. They'd get pushed out of the way. So it would just be dirt on the ground. It wouldn't really look like a forest. So they had these leaf guys whose job was to just collect bags of leaves all day. And then when the leaves got cleared from the area, they'd bring in the leaf guys and they just dump all the leaves on the ground. And they'd go, collect another bag for the next leaf dump.
I didn't hear about that, but it sounds like a good job, the leaf guys. There was another problem in that they tried to film Predator vision with actual infrared cameras. I don't know if this was in the documentary.
Yeah, it was.
But they
pretty much everything you could, because I read a couple articles too, and pretty much everything from the articles that I read was from the documentary.
There was a problem in that one, the cord for the infrared cameras extended only 4 feet from the production van. And number 2, the forest was apparently 90 degrees, so when you looked through the camera, you couldn't actually see the actors in the shot because they were the same temperature as the forest around them.
Yep.
With the jungle, I guess.
I don't think we have to explain how the 90-degree humid forest was also a problem, just for everyone in general.
Well, maybe we should explain that Arnold lost 25 pounds over the course of filming this, apparently by choice.
25 pounds of sweat.
Well, apparently he lost his by choice.
Yeah, by choice.
But what's his name?
It was McTiernan also lost weight.
McTiernan lost weight.
Because he refused to eat and drink.
Yeah, because he didn't want to eat the local cuisine because he was afraid of getting like disease from the
that's what they always say. Like if you live in the U.S., don't drink the water when you go to Mexico or it'll make you sick.
Yeah, well, that's because in the U.S. we are a little bit spoiled in that we have clean tap water in most places. Looking at you, Flint, Michigan. Here where we live, you can basically drink the water straight out of the tap.
Yeah, I mean, Orange County water isn't necessarily the cleanest anyway, but you can still drink it.
Yeah. I mean,
it's recycled water. That's why it's not necessarily the cleanest, because it is just recycled toilet water.
The impurities give it taste.
But that's what they always say in places that still have like lead piping. They're like, man, this lead piping just kills you, but it tastes so good. It tastes better than normal water. I see these people who are like, I don't care, there's lead. They're just drinking straight from the tap. They got their mouth around the tap and like, it's so good. Can't get enough.
Well, I mean, the water that used to come out of my fridge used to be the best water I'd ever tasted. I was like addicted to it. The problem now that my fridge is like pretty much busted, so water doesn't come out of my fridge anymore. So the only option is to drink it straight out of the tap. Straight
out of the tap. You can't get a glass. You can't get a cup. Nothing.
Yeah, you have to stick your mouth underneath the tap. And just full blast, 100 speed. Anyway,
they also brought in, some local film crews and stuff who they were, McTiernan and some of the other prominent guys were pretty displeased with because they weren't as experienced as they had hoped.
Yeah.
So they decided, I don't know why they decided to do this. I think they called a lot of Americans that they knew and that a lot of them weren't available. So they decided to call Australians to come help them with the movie.
Well, maybe Australians have experience living in places designed to kill you.
Maybe. But there were a couple Australians who they called into prominent roles in the movie. I forget what exactly those roles were.
I don't remember because I didn't read much about this specifically. Although I did read that apparently McTiernan... Now, I didn't listen to this, but I read that on the audio commentary that was released for like the special edition of The Predator that they released like in the early 2000s, he did like a director's commentary. Apparently, as soon as the film starts, he sounds really surprised that the opening scene with the spaceship is there, and then he reveals that he didn't actually film that scene and wasn't involved in that scene at all. He said it was always in the script, but it was apparently done completely in post-production, and he had no involvement with the scene at all and had completely forgotten that it even existed until he watched the movie.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because when we were watching it, we were like, man, what is this scene? Because there's that whole entire scene in the movie where they imply that the Predator had been there for like 20 years or whatever, so like, was that a different Predator? Or like, who did we see land on the planet? And then when we started watching Predator 2, we're like, oh, maybe we saw this Predator. Maybe that was the ship from the first one. Like, we didn't know what it was. So.
Yeah, we still don't really know. I mean, it could be the Predator in the first movie from like, it might have landed like hundreds of years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that was like 20 years before or whatever. but like maybe that was completely unrelated to anything that happens in the movie. Maybe that wasn't the Predator. Maybe it was just another alien landing on Earth.
I mean, possibly. We don't know, honestly. Maybe it's in the future, like after the movie ends. We don't know that either, because there's no title card that tells you when or where it's set. Oh, the other thing that I always knew about this movie before it started was the handshake between Dylan and Dutch, which is actually, I found out right at the beginning of the movie. I assume that was like in the middle of the movie.
Oh, actually, yeah, I did know they get to the chopper line. I knew that.
Yeah, there are a lot of quotable famous lines in this. Also, like, if it bleeds, we can kill it. That's also another famous line. But the handshake is really well known. And I always assumed it was in the middle of the movie because the way that the scene is set up, it's like, it's them meeting again after a long time or whatever. So I always assumed, like, in the movie that they would escape the Predator and halfway through they'd, like, find Dutch or they'd find Dylan just chilling in this bar. But no, apparently that's how the movie starts. Apparently the Predator's blood was the inside of glow sticks. Apparently one of the production crew, apparently they wanted to do orange blood for the Predator, but they didn't have anything orange that like glowed. So one of the production crew was like, hey, we could like use the inside of these glow sticks, like this glow juice. McTiernan was like, hey, that's a good idea. So that's how they realized the Predator blood. Fun fact.
Yeah, was a good idea. Yeah, we can get into how they achieve the Predator now, because that's kind of the biggest thing as to whether or not this movie works.
Well, so the original Predator, the original Predator design, I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah, I did see it. And I can totally see why they just flat out rejected it.
It's this big red gangly rubber thing.
Yeah.
And it looks awful. Apparently Jean-Claude Van Damme was going to be the Predator originally. And they tried the suit on him.
And there are, again, differing accounts as to why he wasn't the actual on-screen Predator in the final product.
Of all the things that differ, this is the one that differs the most because there's no real consensus about why Van Damme left the movie, although a lot of people seem to indicate that part of the reason is because Van Damme wasn't going to be able to do a lot of stunts in the suit, and he was predominantly a stuntman. I read a story that they asked him to do a specific stunt, and he said, no, I'll break my legs if I do that, so they got another stuntman to do it, and sure enough, he actually broke his legs when he did it. So... But, you know, a lot of people differ on whether Van Damme quit because of, like, creative differences with McTiernan and the production crew at large, or if they fired him because he was being a nuisance. Apparently, Arnold said Van Damme was always a complainer on set and complained about everything. So, yeah, accounts really differ on this aspect specifically a lot.
Yeah, there are a lot of different stories, and I don't think we're going to go into every single one. But I mean, we should also point out that a lot of them don't paint Van Damme in a bad light. I think just the most prominent ones do, because they're the most sensational.
Well, yeah.
And also, I mean, Arnold, like, I guess you read and called him out for complaining or whatever, but I mean, Arnold, from what I've heard, isn't, like, the best guy to work with either, right? I mean, there's a clip from the making of where he's talking about all the other actors, and he's like, you know, these are really great guys, they're great actors, which, like, no, they're not, but he's like, they're great actors, you know, we're all friends, we all get along, and, you know, they're my equals, so I really like that. And you're like, wow, really? Did you really just say that?
Oh, no. Well, Arnold's actually a pretty great guy, nowadays, anyway. You listen to him talk and all that. He's a pretty great guy.
Maybe being the governor changed him for the better.
Well, apparently I found out Jesse Ventura was former governor of Minnesota, I think it was.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. No,
which is weird to think about because, you know, you think of Jesse Ventura's voice and you think that's just like his movie voice or his acting voice, like his wrestling voice or whatever. But no, he actually just talks like that.
Well, same with Arnold.
Yeah, kind of.
I mean, but like I was saying about Arnold being a good guy, he made a post, this is like a couple of years ago now, where he said there was this hotel when he was the governor of California. It was like, oh, you can come whenever you want, we'll give you a room for free. And then when he went back, when he was no longer the governor, they were like, yeah, no, we don't even know who you are. And he was like, how things can change so quickly when you're in power. Everybody wants to like please you, but when you're not, like nobody cares about you. And it was a picture of him like sleeping, like lying down in front of the statue of him in front of the hotel. There was a statue of him in front of the hotel. So,
all right, but what does that have to do with him being a good guy?
I don't know. Just him drawing attention to the fact that everybody brown noses, politicians, I guess.
All right.
He also called out Trump a lot, so you know. want to give him points on that one. Anyone who calls out Trump is good in my book, especially if they're a Republican. As
All
Arnold
right, that's
was.
a really like low bar for being a good person.
Yeah, well,
So makes me question your standards.
yeah, I have pretty low standards. I have pretty wild standards. The bar that like people have to cross to be a good person is not like flat. It's like a rounded.
It differs for every
it's
person.
Like, it's like a parabola. So depending where you cross over the bar, it's going to be a different bar to cross. Anyway,
Just
so
run right under the bar.
the Predator costume. They scrapped the red one and they're like, we should.
Yeah, I mean, just
redesign
look like if you're thinking like, oh, these are snobbish movie makers just scrapping the costumes they were provided and not being grateful. No, just look this thing up. Just
look at the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes. Just look. We'll put a picture in the show notes. But the second costume was much better, and apparently James Cameron had some unintentional influence on it because he apparently was talking with the costume designer. Like, man, I always wanted to see something with mandibles. The costume designer, hey, that's a good idea. So they gave the Predator costume mandibles, which are those like 4
spiked things coming off its mouth.
In the mouth,
its
yeah.
Mouth.
And yeah, the Predator costume was basically really well realized. I actually know more about making the Predator costume for the second movie than the first,
Because
weirdly
there's that
enough.
huge article when you just Google like making of Predator 2 and
Because the production company that made the costume in Predator 2 put out this huge article about what they did and how they made it and everything they did to do.
And that was
it.
that production or that design company is the design company of the costume designer for Predator 1 and 2.
I'm just going to give their name. The Stan Winston.
Yeah, Stan Winston is the guy who was like, James Cameron was like, I really like to see mandibles. And he was like, well, watch this. And he just drew the thing with mandibles. That was him. So they got Kevin Hall to play the Predator because he's like 7'6", so they needed someone who would be like
bigger than Arnold and Carl
right.
Weathers and Jesse Ventura
Right.
and all these bodybuilders.
Right.
And Shane Black. And yeah, they shot him like, well, they tried not to shoot him direct on. Apparently when they're trying to do the invisible Predator, I don't know if this was in the documentary, they tried to get a monkey to do it, and the monkey was apparently too embarrassed and like didn't want to act, so they had to do it using, I don't know how they actually realized it, but
it was interesting. I didn't, because there were a lot of technical terms into how this was made, so I didn't really necessarily get all of it. But they got it was actual footage and like composited like shots of the background over like where the Predator was, and they used like this concentric technique to have it like radiating out. I don't know. It was complicated, but looked good, overall. And I forget who it was, but someone, I think it might have been Weathers actually. He was like, this, a lot of the horror in this movie comes from the characters themselves not being able to see the Predator for the first, like half of the movie almost.
yeah.
And yeah, that's actually a good point. And but that's also something that kind of detracts from the movie, right? Like the characters are really scared because there's this unknown force, but like we also see the Predator multiple times and stuff like that. But I mean, we'll get into that.
Well, we also see Predator vision.
Right.
Which, since they couldn't realize with IR cameras, they had to do basically in post-production, which was another reason why this movie started to run like pretty close to, it actually ran over budget because they had to do that. And McTiernan had to go to the studios like, hey, we need a couple more $1 million to do this Predator vision thing.
In terms of the Predator vision, one of the reasons why they combined like actual just regular camera footage with like the heat vision effect was because if you just see heat vision, it's like really hard to tell what's going on.
Yeah.
So like, man, this isn't really going to make for a good scene if we do this. So we're not going to do it.
Well, Predator vision became pretty famous.
Iconic.
Iconic.
It's on the poster. The poster is Arnold
and in
Schwarzenegger
fact,
against
weirdly enough, there's
Predator
a reference to it in the Doctor Who episode that we haven't watched when we're recording this, but we'll have watched by the time this goes out, and will go out about 5 days from now, or less than 5 days from now.
It's interesting. Well, Silurian vision was always a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Another Doctor Who connection. The composer for the third one composed
John
the TV
Debney.
movie. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, Alan Silvestri does the music for the first two.
Yeah, like I said, 3 minutes into watching the first one, you wouldn't be able to tell.
Well, I think you can tell a little while into the movie because a lot of the things in the score are classic Alan Silvestri things. He likes to use a lot of horns.
Yeah, but even
It's
then,
his first
it's not
action
just
movie, though, so
enough to know. Like, you might be able to tell, like, when you already know that, but, like, is it really something where you
I
listen
guess
to it
if
and
you're
you're
a
like, hey,
film score fanatic, you would know. But it's his first action movie score, and he did this right after Back to the Future, I think. I don't think he did another movie between the two. And then he also came back for the second one. Didn't come back for the third one, though, even though he still does music
yeah,
movies. He did the Avengers. Fun fact.
huh,
The first one, and he did Infinity War, but he didn't do Age of Ultron. Danny Elfman did Age of Ultron.
all right.
There you go. That's your fun fact for the day.
Yeah, sad story about Kevin Hall. He died, like, shortly after the second one came out at,
Right.
like, age 35 of HIV/AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Which is a good segue
He
into
was,
talking about the second one, I guess.
yeah, well, we can talk about the, like, sort of the release and the reception of it, which
Mm-hmm.
was a bigger hit than, I think anyone really thought it would be.
Well, it was coming out around that time of action movies. The 80s action movie, that's a
Well, a lot of the classic
stereotype.
ones, right? A lot of the classic, like, action movies that are well known today are from this era, like
yeah,
Aliens, Terminator, and
Predator.
Predator, probably a few more that we're not thinking of right now. But those are, I think, the three big ones.
Right. Those are the big three. Predator is one of those. And Predator really set the bar, I think, for action movies. And then Predator 2 came along, and they were like, we should get Arnold back. And Arnold was like, nah, I'm filming Terminator 2. And they were like, damn, now we'll have to recast him, rewrite the script. So they did. They got good man Donald Glover. Not Donald Glover. Danny Glover.
Yeah, Danny Glover.
His dad.
And they said it, this was apparently, something they started thinking about in the first one, like, man, this entire thing is in a jungle. It's like a traditional hunting setting, right? Like the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
But what if the Predator came to LA? And that was the start of all their troubles. Well, they're like, all right, so these predators, and they explain this in the second one, are a species that comes to Earth to hunt, and they go to dangerous locations. They go to places
with
where
lots of heat too.
Places where there's lots of heat. They go to where the action is.
Right.
And this is 1997 LA. It's in the future from when this is being made. And they're like, oh, the Predator, there's a lot of violence. There's a lot going on here, and the temperatures are record high, so the Predator is going to come here.
Apparently they actually filmed it in LA.
Yeah, they did.
Which surprised me because a lot of movies that have set in LA aren't actually filmed in LA. They're filmed in like Toronto.
Right.
Or some other stand-in city, and they just do establishing shots of LA.
Yeah, and since we're talking about it, there's a lot of interesting stories from, God, who directed the second one? I forget his name.
It was, here we go. Oh, sorry. Stephen Hopkins.
Hopkins. There are a lot of interesting stories from Hopkins about just the stuff they were able to get away with in LA. And this is, stuff he was looking back on like maybe 10 or 15 years later. And he's like, yeah, we would never be able to get away with some of this stuff now, like landing a helicopter in the street. They wouldn't allow that now. The work they did on top of the buildings would be much harder, I guess, just with newer safety regulations and stuff like that. It would be much harder to be able to do that kind of stuff. He was like, yeah, we were just filming in alleyways and stuff, and there were rats all over the place, and we found a dead body in one of the alleyways.
Yeah,
I don't know if
I read that.
I don't know if I believe like a lot of that stuff. And he's like, man, people were putting rats on leashes and taking them for walks.
Yeah, I read a lot of this too, that they had a lot of interesting problems in filming in LA, like they did in the jungle with all this like setting stuff up and it being impossible to negotiate or navigate and just being an all-around complete disaster.
Is there a single Predator movie that didn't run into problems? Yeah, I guess Predators.
Well, it took them 16 or 10 years to make that one.
Once they started making it, there were problems when they started making that one, but we'll get into it. So they made the second one. It's all in LA. The actors in it aren't as big names.
Well, Danny Glover was, because he had been in Lethal Weapon, a Shane Black connection there, weirdly enough. But he was pretty big because of Lethal Weapon. The rest of them weren't super well known.
And still aren't for the most part.
Yeah, still aren't for the most part. Adam Baldwin was in a TV show called Chuck a couple of years ago as a main character. And there were a couple other big names now are big names in the second movie. Gary Busey is a pretty big name, or was a big name, and Bill Paxton as well. Bill Paxton was in Aliens. So there were a few big names, but not like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers and Jesse Ventura,
Well, also, I mean, you have to think Predator is one of the movies that made Schwarzenegger famous. Oh, he was known before.
Terminator mostly. Yeah, Terminator was the one that really launched his acting career.
Yeah.
The Predator costume in the second one was really interesting because they wanted to give this Predator really its own kind of style.
Well, right. So this is something I really liked because, the idea behind this was like, it's a different species and, to us all like, animals might look the same, or like all dogs of the same breed like look the same or something like that. All the different species look the same. And they sometimes say the same thing about, when animals look at humans, or like when chimps look at humans, like we all look the same to them or whatever. And this alien, like on screen, I should say Predator, not to confuse it like with the Alien franchise. But like the Predator in the second one looks really similar to the one in the first one, to where you wouldn't like necessarily notice the differences unless you were trying to spot them. I just really liked how they did that.
Well, they even brought back the original Predator costume. The elder Predator in the kind of council in the ship is the original Predator costume with a kind of a paint touch up and just some slight modifications.
Yeah, they brought it back in the third one too. I don't think they used the actual costume, but they brought the design of the original Predator back, which just goes to show you how strong the original design is compared to some of the other ones from. It's not so much the second one because it was, again, pretty similar, but like compared to
the second one they actually did. You can't really see it in the movie, but that Predator Council, every single Predator there is completely different. Apparently,
you can see it in the movie. Like I could tell.
You can put different. Well, they put quite a number of money and time into making those costumes for a few minutes of screen time.
Yeah.
And apparently, this little council is called the Lost Predators because apparently they lost all those costumes right after filming. Just they completely lost them and they have no idea what happened to them. So,
well, that's the thing about like movie preservation is like even up until recently, a lot of studios and stuff didn't really think that anyone would care like at all after the movie was made. They're like, well, our goal is to make this movie, so once it's done, if we can't use the stuff again, just scrap it. And that's a big thing in animation as well. You look at like early, even Disney did this, but like a lot of early animation studios that are now, their cells are like collector's items, but like back in the day, the mentality was like, well, our goal is to make this cartoon, this animation. Once it's done,
we don't need any
done.
of
We
stuff.
don't need it anymore,
done.
and they're just throwing like these priceless things, priceless cells, things that people nowadays pay thousands of dollars for. They're just throwing them in the trash.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was the same with Doctor Who. Like, they didn't know the show would run forever, and they would just take the old footage and they're just like, well, we don't need this anymore. Just wipe the tapes and record over it.
Yeah, especially back in the day of like, just pre-VHS, pre like being able to watch stuff again, really.
Yeah, so the only copy was the one of the BBC archives, and they would just take the footage and they just wipe it and record over it. And so that's why there's still a lot of episodes still missing from that early period of Doctor Who, because they just recorded over the tapes.
Which you can't really blame them for. Like back in the day, it's like an economical thing to do. Especially like there's no way they could have known that people would either want those years down the line or even be able to use them. Right,
because space and storage right now is so it's a lot cheaper. Like computer space, it's smaller too. It doesn't take up physical space. But back in the day, especially when you're making movies, like in this movie, you got all these Predator props, and you don't know if there's going to be another Predator movie. So you're looking at them and you're like, well, what's really the point of hanging on to all these props? Like some production dude probably just went, well, we're not going to need these again, and threw them away. That's probably where they went lost.
Yep. When you bring up digital storage, even like you think about, even just 10 years ago, if you wanted 15 gigs of storage 10 years ago, you're paying like upwards of $50.
Yeah.
Nowadays, like you make a Google account and you have 15 gigabytes online storage free.
You get a 16 gigabyte flash drive for like less than $10 now. you could get for, just a couple $100 now. You can get like a terabyte solid state drive, not even a hard drive, like a solid state drive, which is like high end, and it's pretty speedy. Like for just a couple $100, like the price of storage has decreased dramatically, even over the course of this podcast. 4 years ago, we used an external hard drive, 500 gigabytes, which at the time was like, that was a pretty big number when we started Trust Your Doctor. That was a pretty big number, and that was, it wasn't an expensive hard drive, but it wasn't cheap either. And now, was it right when we started Zenith? I got a new one. I got a 4 terabyte external hard drive for $100, which is like, first off, like half the cost of the 500 gigabyte one we used at the start, and it's 8 times the storage space. Anyway, back to the movie. They designed this second Predator to look more menacing. They painted it in more red tones than the brown tones they used in the first one.
Still Kevin Hall playing it.
Right, they got Kevin Hall back. He would pass away shortly after the release of this film.
Right.
That's actually about all I have about the second movie, because, once again, the actors weren't really big names. They had a lot of problems on set, and that was kind of the big thing. The budget of the second one came out to be about twice that of the first one, and it completely bombed in relation to the first one. It made not really much more than the first one on like twice to almost triple the budget.
Well,
I'll look up exact numbers for you. I know the first movie was made.
It made 50 million. It was done like 30 something million.
Yeah, the first one was 15 to 18 million budget and made 98 million, whereas the second one was made on a 35 million budget and made only 57 million.
So it was profitable, but not as much as they would have hoped. Not as much as they would have hoped.
And also, the other thing is, typically those film budgets don't include how much they spent on marketing. So the profit margin is actually a lot smaller than you realize, because it doesn't typically factor in the cost they spent on marketing.
Sure. Okay. So I mean, like, you think about marketing, and if it's a smaller movie, that's gonna like double the budget. So
yeah.
Which I'm sure. Actually, I'm not sure, but I would imagine that marketing on this wouldn't double the budget because it's sort of a bigger-ish movie.
Well, I suspect them to spend maybe $5 million on marketing in this movie. Maybe 10.
5 to 10 is what I would put it at.
Yeah,
like for a movie like this. Which, like, for the first one, that's like, that would put a big dent in, or not put a big dent, but like really increase how much they spent. But hey.
So yeah.
But it's a bad movie, so just it goes to show you, like, the name can't carry you all the way. It can carry you most of the way.
Yeah.
But if at the end of the day, if it's a bad movie, it's a bad movie. I don't actually believe that, because a lot of bad movies are some of them like highest grossing movies. So, but here's an example of it working out how I would want.
Well, it might have just been because it was such a drastic departure from the first one. People didn't even go see it. I don't know. And we could speculate all day on why the second one did so poorly.
Watching the making of for the second one actually made me realize some similarities between the first one and the second one, and we'll get into that when we get into how it works as a trilogy. Because I was ready to come in here and be like, this doesn't work as a trilogy at all. It completely fails as a trilogy. And to some extent, I'm still going to say that, but to some extent, I'm not.
Well, we should talk about the third one before we get there. The third one was apparently developed Robert Rodriguez. Who's a name you may or may not recognize. I don't
recognize it because it's a very like generic name. I mean, I'm sure like when you pull up his page, he's worked on some stuff that you would have heard of.
Yeah. Well, he worked on Sin City, in 2005.
Okay.
Based on the comic book.
Yeah.
And also Spy Kids. 1, 2, and 3.
Wow.
Also Machete Kills and Machete.
Oh. Another Alien connection, because Alien, God, why do I keep calling it Alien? Another Predator connection, because Predators has what's his face?
Danny Trejo.
Danny Trejo.
He's also doing that movie that comes up soon, Alita: Battle Angel, which looks like garbage. No, actually, Alita looks good. I'm thinking of Mortal Engines, which looks bad.
No, it doesn't. Look, as a big animation fan, almost all Hollywood adaptations of like anime are awful.
Yeah, but how can you say this one looks bad if you haven't seen it? Or if you haven't seen anything about it, I mean.
I have seen stuff about it, and it looks...
Well, it was written by James Cameron, so it'll probably be bad, because James Cameron has made a good movie since Titanic.
The script might be all right, but like just the look of it, if you compare it to the original comic.
Yeah, but they're separate mediums, so you should...
But like it looks so bad.
This is the whole thing.
So
we had this whole discussion on Jurassic Park. They're separate mediums, so you shouldn't intercompare mediums.
Well, first of all, I don't agree with the use of the word medium. I have some philosophical qualms with that, but we're not going to get into that.
Just accept the term.
Just
you know what I mean.
Even if I know what you mean. Even if you don't look at the comic, or just look at it just looks bad. But whatever, we don't have to talk about that.
In 1994, he wrote the script, and Fox was like, "No, we're going to pass. Franchise is dying. We're going to do Aliens versus Predator instead."
But that didn't even come out for a while.
And apparently both of them sucked, so... Apparently then in like 2000, I think it was like 6, they were like, "Hey, Robert, we found your script in the vault." And we were like, "Hey, we want to do it now."
We found the script in the trash.
Turns out this is what we want to do now. How are you feeling? And he's like, "Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm busy on these other projects, so I can't direct it." And they were like, "Okay, well, we'll just get this other guy to direct it." And they got this complete nobody who I've never heard of before. His name is Nimrod Antal.
Right.
He's Hungarian, and he apparently made some
which I guess
movies before.
Yeah, it's not his first movie, but he's a pretty unknown guy.
Yeah,
and you can see why. And you watch Predators, and you can see why.
Well, the directing of Predators isn't bad. It's just
sure, all right. Yeah, it's actually, you know what it is mostly. I think the script that lets this all down, and the actors. Still not going to let them live down that line. Doesn't matter what happened or why. How did that make it into the movie, honestly?
Well, also they kill off Danny Trejo first, which is just the cardinal sin of movie making, is you never kill off Danny Trejo.
Well, they also kill off Lawrence Fishburne. They finally have some huge names who were huge at the time. Well, I guess Arnold was as well.
Yeah.
Arnold is probably the only one who's on a first name basis in these movies.
Well, Danny Trejo is on a full name basis.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You always, at most actors are on a full name basis. There's not many people you can just say Arnold and you know who it is.
Well, Keanu.
Well, I think that's just because Keanu has a very distinctive name. But no, also
name another Arnold actor.
But also Keanu as well. So.
Yeah. Well, name another actor named Arnold.
Well, I mean that's the thing, right? Like when you say Arnold, you're talking about Arnold. Like he's the one who's on the first name basis. So.
Well, name another actor named Arnold, because you say Keanu has a unique name, so I don't know any other actor named Arnold.
No, but I feel like Arnold is like a more common name than Keanu.
Yeah, but my point is is there another actor even named Arnold? Because I can't think of any.
But like not on the same level. Like
I guess
that's what the thing is. Like Arnold is Arnold.
Well, it doesn't matter if they have big names anyway, because they kill them off basically immediately. Actually, the main guy, the guy who plays the quote main character in Predators, Adrian Brody, he's actually a pretty big name too at the time, because he was in King Kong before, and the Darjeeling Limited, which was a Wes Anderson movie, which are pretty big, and also the Pianist, which is a really famous movie because it won like a whole bunch of Oscars, including Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actor, and Best Picture.
Off the Wikipedia page.
Well, won Best Actor for Adrian Brody. So he was like a pretty big name that I've never heard of since.
Yeah, he was. I guess he's an early 2010s star who fell off the map in these last couple of years.
Maybe he fell off the map because of this movie. Everyone watched this movie.
Maybe they actually stranded him on an alien planet.
Wow, that would suck.
So they come up with the script 14 years later, 15 years later.
Well, they dig it out of the file cabinet.
That's what I meant by they come up with it. They bring it up out of the grave that it had supposedly been placed in or whatever.
Yeah, and they have these two guys kind of rewrite it. Lidvik and what's the other guy's name?
No, it was Shane Black and Fred Decker.
They're doing the Predator. They're doing the new one. Shane Black and Fred Decker are doing the new one. Alex Lidvik and Michael Finch did Predators. Yeah, so Alex Lidvik and Michael Finch kind of rewrote this whole script. Although I think Robert Rodriguez, I don't think he gets story credit, but he is a producer on the movie. He wasn't able to direct because he was busy with something else at the time.
Yeah, and sort of the idea behind this is paying homage to the first one, whereas the second one was kind of a departure, but paying homage to the first one, but not doing exactly the same thing. Not a really unique concept, but
Well,
You can see it, I guess, on screen.
you can see it, I guess.
I guess their way of paying homage to the first one was putting lines in from the first one that people knew.
Well, there's also that line that was clearly written for the trailer that I can almost guarantee appears in the trailer for the movie where he goes like, "This is their planet. This is their turf. We need to take a fight to them." Which I can bet was in the trailer selling it as like they're going to attack the Predator planet. And then you watch the movie and you're like, what the hell is this?
But I mean, that really actually sucks that they spoil that they're on the Predator planet because in the trailer, because I didn't watch the trailer or anything. I didn't know anything.
Yeah, I
going
didn't
into the
either. I
movie.
just know that line was written for the trailer because I've seen enough movie trailers to know.
But I mean, they also spoil it in the Amazon description and just the description for the movie in general, like where it's publicized and everything. But like going into this, I really liked the beginning of this movie because there's suspense, there's tension, there's like, man, where are we? We were airdropped in the middle of nowhere. Are we even on Earth? And I was interested, to find out where they were. That's why I think the first maybe 20 minutes of that movie are pretty good. And after that, it kind of just falls off. But
well, there's a pretty rapid decline as soon as they actually see the Predators because internal strife in the group. Oh, there's one other guy in this movie who you might recognize, but I don't remember his name now. But he appears in Ant-Man and the Wasp recently as the secondary antagonist.
Huh. All right.
So, Sonny Birch is the character's name, not the actor's name. So that's how they conceive the movie.
I was wondering where this was done.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out it was filmed in both Hawaii and Texas, which is interesting. Hawaii you can see, right, like the tropical rainforest and stuff like that. But they actually, when they went back to Austin, Texas, I don't know why they went back there. I guess it was for movie making purposes, or they're doing some stuff out of Austin, Texas. I don't know why, but the cave scene was in Austin. Some other stuff was as well. So the waterfall jump was done for real.
Homage to the first movie,
right? It was done for real in Hawaii. Again, I don't know if it was done for real in the first one.
I don't know either.
I think the first one, when you see Arnold jump off, and I'm pretty sure it's a stuntman falling off. Like, just if you go and watch the scene again, and I'm pretty sure it is, but no, the actors actually did it for this one.
Well, I'll give them credit for that at least. Not that they're acting really.
I mean, not that they're acting like plays into jumping off the waterfall, but
yeah, well, but not that their acting really sells this movie.
No, but it's a cool experience.
They also came up with this idea of there being like a caste system, I guess, in the Predator.
A lot of thought went into, because this is on the Predator planet, a lot of thought went into like the ecology of the world, and really when they were, I forget, this might have been Litvak or Finch who said it, but I don't remember. They're like, when the script was getting touched up, we're gonna add more to this. We're gonna add more about like the wildlife on the planet and all these different species. And then Avatar came out, and we didn't want to go that way anymore.
Yeah, this is the kind of hidden story behind Predator is that James Cameron secretly makes it big by talking to the costume designer, and then completely balls up the rest of the franchise unintentionally because he's doing Terminator 2, so Arnold can't come back for Predator 2, and then he releases Avatar, which completely balls up the ecology of the third one. So really we have James Cameron to both thank and despise for these movies.
James Cameron secretly sabotaging Predator from behind the scenes for the last 30 years.
Yeah, after he saw big the first one, he was like, I gotta secretly sabotage. Illuminati.
Was that
the X-Files theme?
Oh.
It is rather strange, though, that James Cameron seems to keep having this weird
presence in all movies.
Yeah. Especially since Avatar was the last movie he actually made to present day.
Well, he's making 2 and 3.
And 4. And 5.
And 4. Supposedly.
Well, he filmed them all at the same time.
Supposedly.
I think he did. I think they're still filming, actually. Weird
I
how...
haven't watched the first one.
Neither have I.
And I'm probably not going to.
Yeah. Well. Same. I just find it interesting that James Cameron was this huge filmmaker in the 80s and the 90s, and then he made Avatar, and he was like, well,
Well, when your
I
name's that big and you
no,
make like a movie as big as Avatar, you kind of don't need to even do anything anymore unless you want
I
to.
guess. But you look at his IMDb page, it's kind of weird. It's like Avatar 2008, and there's like he directed like a
It was a
documentary in
9. You know, a 9.
2010 or 2011, and then there's nothing. And then it's like Avatar 2, Avatar 3, Avatar 4.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, you know, I mean, we don't have to get too far into it, but like, you can just ride, if you have a movie as big as Avatar, you can just ride the coattails or never work again. And he's doing one of those things. I mean, the other option is like you can continue trying to make good movies that are standalone movies
Yeah.
and new
Which is
IPs, and like that's probably the best thing to
most
do from
other
like a consumer
big, yeah.
standpoint. But it's not what he's doing, and that's okay.
You gotta do whatever creatively fulfills you, I guess. And for James Cameron, that's making a billion Avatar movies. And I think another Terminator movie. I think he bought the rights to Terminator back. Anyway, that's besides the point. What else happened with the third one? Not much.
They decided to scrap the Avatar-like concept. They decided to really focus in on the hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they kind of just went with that.
They didn't have as many problems filming it as the first one, but they did have problems. As seems to be the norm for these movies. The Predator shows as well, the fourth one.
The waterfall cave, I know, the one done in Texas. When they first scouted that location, there wasn't a waterfall there. So when they came back, the sound designers were like, "Are you freaking serious? There's a waterfall here now?" So I couldn't hear what the actors were saying. Had to edit out all that noise. And just had a nightmare. The water was also, when they came back, the water was way colder than it was when they first scouted it. So they had the actors like wading through the water, just like freezing, like, oh, freaking sucks.
Well, that was actually something I forgot to mention on the first one. Was they tried to make the actual infrared cameras work by spraying ice water on the leaves of the trees and then having the actors stand near fires before they filmed with the infrared cameras, but it didn't work.
Well, that's another thing actually that I forgot about the first one is you look at some of the makeup work done for the first one and you realize just how hard it is because these are characters who are wearing camouflage and paint and stuff like that. So that and the movie only takes place over a couple of days. So they have to put on this same makeup the same way and make it look the same, getting consistent day after day after day. And these are people who are also getting wounds and they're getting injured as they, make their way through the forest, and they have to make those wounds look the same day after day after day. Take them off at the end of the day, put them on exactly the same way in the morning the next day. It's pretty impressive.
Well, that's why you have continuity people who take pictures at the beginning and the ending.
What's the name for that? There's a name for it. It's not continuity people.
Continuity expert.
I forget what it is.
They usually get credited in the credits.
Yeah,
too.
And there's
like
a specific term for
or something.
it. It's not continuity. It's something else. But whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, whatever.
It's just an impressive thing.
And then the third one came out, and they were like, "Well, this was a moderate success. I'm going to pull up some budget and numbers.
I'm
here.
sure it was still a success.
Budget $40 million, and it made $127 million. So
better than the.
So better, but if you account for
one.
inflation, not much better than the first one. Accounting for inflation, probably.
I'm sure probably not better than the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not doing the math in my head, but just looking at the numbers, probably not better than the first one. But better than the second one, definitely.
Right.
And it is a better movie than the second one, so
Yeah.
it all panned out.
And then the Predator franchise went on ice for a while, and they're like, let's do another one. And Shane Black came up with this idea, and he pitched it to the executives, and they're like, yeah, we'll do that. Shane Black's movie apparently acknowledges the other movie, so it's set after the first two, but before the third one.
They all acknowledge the first one.
Right. The third one, interestingly, doesn't seem to acknowledge the second one, which is maybe a segue into like how these work as a trilogy.
Right. And I've got to say, pretty badly.
Well, I think they work okay. I think.
Right. What's your reasoning behind them working okay?
So you get this bookending with the forest setting between the first and the third one. And you have the second one, which is like the change of location. But the second one also, carries a lot of the same thematic ties to the first one. The Predator only comes where it's hot. It's hunting people.
I don't call those thematic ties. I just call them like plot ties.
Just ties. And I think they do tie the second movie to the first one. And the second movie is like, oh, we go bigger. You get, you get the one predator, but then at the end you have this whole predator council on the ship. You see the predator ship for the first time. It's this escalation that I think was necessary for a sequel, and they didn't do the same thing. And then the third one, even though it's still set in a forest, you escalate again, and
it's on the predator planet.
It's on the predator planet. And there's multiple predators. There's a whole bunch of predators. There's a caste system. So it's this escalation. Plus the third one is like you've got that bookend with the first one with the setting. Do I think it's perfect? No, because beyond the fact that there's like the connection with the predators, you have no returning characters. The actual like links and references between the movies are
shoehorned in and done really badly.
Best. Yeah, and the second movie, the link to the first one is like Arnold and Anna told them about the predator, and then they have some footage of Anna just in the bombed out region of the forest showing them the damage.
And the third one is like, you remember that incident that took place in
87?
Yeah. Actually, I think they do reference the second one in the third one. They're like, it also, the same thing happened in L.A.
Really? I don't remember them saying that.
Yeah,
because I remember making a comment like, but what about that time it happened 10 years later in L.A. when we were watching the movie?
Yeah, I don't remember. I could just be making that up. I truly don't know. But like, here's the thing when you about the first one and about why I think the first one is good and why I think the last 10 minutes of the first one are great. I think everything after Arnold jumps off the waterfall is actually really great. Is because when you get down to it, this first movie is all about like nature versus technology, and that's actually, Predator isn't like a very scary movie, right? But
no, it's an action movie.
But the horror I think of this comes. I mean, you compare this to Alien, right? Because of Alien versus Predator, but like you compare it to Alien, and the horror in Alien, the first one, is like a very xenophobic horror, right? This alien looks so alien, and it looks scary, and it's not like us, and that's why it looks scary, is because it looks so different. But you think about Predator, and you're like, you look at what this character is, and you're like, all right, it looks pretty human. It's humanoid at least, and you get into, I'll talk about some of the like race and gender like dynamic too, because of the dread thing. Dreads, has dreads, and some people say, and I'd be inclined to agree, that like it's designed to look like a black man. But like,
I mean, you can see that more in the second movie when they have the slightly racist voodoo cult.
Sure.
And you have
stereotypical, definitely. But like in this first one, like you get down to these things where like the horror of the Predator comes from like, this is what we could be if we rely too much on tech, right? Like the thing, it has a med kit and it's combined with technology. It has a med kit in its knee. It can't freaking take off when it takes off its mask, it can't see. Like it needs the mask to even just do something as basic as see. And like you think,
all right, that was one of the weird things about the Predator, is that it can see pretty well without the mask in the first movie, because he takes it off to do the one-on-one with Arnold.
But not that. It's like
it's not really that different from what he sees through the mask. It's just a lot more muted.
But
whereas in the second and third movie, it seems like you take the mask off and they're like blind.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of a connection there. But like, you think about this humanoid, this thing that's pretty similar to humans, and its motivation even, that it's just coming there to hunt. And you're like, man, this is where we could go. And like, this is set up. This is all throughout the movie. And I was thinking about it. I was noticing it more and more. Like this is the first thing in this movie you see is one of the first things, the handshake scene, right? And Arnold's like, what, they've got you pushing pencils at the CIA? And like, Arnold, this guy who has to go back to nature, right? The only way he survives is by like giving up all his gear, and he goes he goes mano a mano with the alien once he gives up all his stuff, and the alien, stop calling it the alien, the Predator. Yeah, the Predator takes off its tech too, but it can't, it's gone farther than humans. It can't not rely on its tech like we can. Like there's still this chance in this movie for us to go back, for us to not rely on technology to the point where it's a detriment to us. And this extreme in this movie. You can't even freaking use a knife in this movie. Like you think about the Sonny, what's his face character, the Native American character, who's not ever said to be Native American in the movie, but like it's what it's implied, he is, and just done in a stereotypical way, right, with the hairstyle, and he's like looking in the forest, and he has like a connection with the forest, and like that's also the thing with this movie, is like there's always, I think in movies, this primitive, like, and this is really questionable as well, like there's this primitivism to characters who aren't like to not non-white, like the more masculine a character is, and the lighter a character is, and by lighter I mean like in terms of skin color, the more they're disconnected from like this natural thing, right? And this movie is like all about Arnold like going back to this, and you think about even at the end, he sets this trap for the predator using his knives. He ties the knives to that trap, and the predator's like, haha, you're not gonna get me. And like the thing that kills him is using like a freaking log and a vine. And like you can't even use a knife in this movie, man. Like are we supposed to go back to this like pre-Stone Age?
Well, in the second one he uses...
Yeah, the second one, that's the thing. Why I don't think this necessarily works as a trilogy, because the second one kind of throws all that out.
Well, the second one, he uses the knife from the Predator, though, the really sharp one to kill a Predator. That was the thing, the guns, like... Everybody loses their guns in the second one. Everybody who tries to shoot the Predator completely misses. The thing that actually does beat the Predators is a knife. I mean, yeah, it's a futuristic, super sharp, cut-through-anything knife, but at the end of the day, the way that... I don't even remember his name, that's how forgettable the second one was, but... The guy beats the Predators by using this knife. So I don't know if it necessarily throws it out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When I was watching the making of, I was a lot of the actors surprisingly were saying things that made me think that, all right, there are some like connections to this, and God, I'm forgetting what exactly those things were. Oh, right, there was like the horror. They're saying the horror of the second movie comes from like, this is where Los Angeles really could be in 10 years, right? Like with climate change, it could be 110 degrees is the norm every day in summer in LA. It could be, that there's just violence in the streets 10 years from now. It turns out they'd have to wait like 30 years, but hey.
Yeah, well.
But yeah, that kind of made me more okay with the second one as this sort of speculative thing of like, is this really where we want to go? And there's still a chance for us to go back.
Yeah, right.
Third one, I don't know if the third one does that. But
no, not really.
Not really. But like we can get into also some of the, like we mentioned, some of the like stereotypes and like the race and gender thing. Like you think of the first one, and this is I think kind of typical for movies of this era, and is why Aliens and Alien really is a bit of a standout. Is that you think of like the female character because there's only one in this, and she doesn't talk, she doesn't really do anything, except drop some cryptic hints, which is kind of cool actually.
And then it's revealed that she can talk English, and it's like, wait a minute.
But she's mute for most of the movie and stuff like that, which is like a question.
Well, because it's a stereotypical masculine machismo action movie,
right?
Same thing with Terminator. Aliens was the exception where like the female character was like the lead, the hero who like actually knows what's going on, is actually doing everything. Like Terminator, big machismo man, Arnold Schwarzenegger protecting a little boy, and woman barely appears.
Yeah.
So I mean, Sarah Connor later on gets a lot of character development and becomes pretty awesome. But you look at the first movie, Terminator 1, it's like barely even a factor.
Right. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, there's this short story by James Tiptree Jr., who is female, by the way. That's his pseudonym, who is a science fiction sort of writer from, I think, like the 70s, maybe early 80s or so. I forget what this story's called. I'll put it in the notes. But it's about this fishing trip to Central America, and it takes a Predator-like turn.
It takes a Predator-like turn.
But the ending is not something you'd see coming. I was pretty surprised by the ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
put it
in the notes.
The show notes.
Yeah.
Or at least put the name in the show notes.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily link to something that's sketchy. It's not legal. Sketchy legality. But I don't actually have much more to say about this franchise. I'm glad I saw it. It's always like, gotta see Predator. Predator was always on my list of those classic movies that I hadn't seen yet, so...
I'm glad I watched it, I guess. I mean, I could have done without the second one, but...
Yeah, maybe just watch the first and the third one. Maybe skip the second one entirely, unless you really like bad movies for some reason, but it's not even, like, enjoyable bad, it just...
No, really.
And it's only, like, an hour and 40, and it feels like 4 hours. Compared to the first one, which actually moves pretty swiftly, and the third one doesn't move as swiftly, but moves pretty quickly too.
There's almost no dialogue for like the last 30 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, that was a questionable choice too.
As for expanded universe type stuff, there's a lot.
There's comics. There's
Books.
Alien versus Predators.
Right, which is sort of the biggest thing. And Alien versus Predator, I'd say, is almost even more famous than Predator itself. Because you talk about like Predator, and this happened with Alien, which is weird because I do think Alien is a bigger franchise than Predator.
Oh, definitely. They still make Alien movies.
They still make Predator movies.
Oh yeah, but what? Look, it's like
they're trying to bring it. They're trying to bring it back, but also Alien is a better franchise. So. But I mean, you just like compare Alien, and I know like the first Alien predates Predator by like 10 years, but compare Alien and Predator 1-to-1, like Alien and Predator, Aliens and Predator 2, like Alien just outranks them in like every single time. Like Alien's better than Predator. Aliens is definitely better than Predator 2.
But is the Alien better than the Predator? Watch Alien versus Predator to find out again. It's weird. Everybody thinks that like cinematic universes are like a new thing, but Hollywood's been doing them since the 30s. But, you know, even just as recently as like the 70s, you had Alien, or the 80s and the 90s, you have Alien versus Predator. Like, this is a big team-up event that Hollywood was doing. Like, big cinematic universes and team-up movies are like not a new thing. They've always been there. No, it's kind of an easy way to cash in, too, because you're like, Alien fans will see it, Predator fans will see it. You got both fan bases to see it, but then one fan base is going to be extremely disappointed when there's lose. I mean, Hollywood did it with Freddy versus Jason, too.
I mean, this isn't even a new concept, right? You look at stuff like Sherlock Holmes versus, however the frick you pronounce his name, Arsène Lupin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even older than that, too. I mean,
I do know that in the Alien vs. Predator movies, they do the Pred-Alien. The alien puts a chest burster inside a Predator, and
you got to do that. Like,
we talked about in the Alien franchise how the alien takes on characteristics of whatever species it gets put into. So you have to do that when you get the Predator and the alien together.
Yeah.
So and then there's Alien versus Predator comics and Alien versus Predator books. There's video games.
Yeah, we were thinking of playing the pinball
Alien
board
versus pinball.
There's a Predator.
There's an Alien versus
board.
Predator pinball board in that mobile game.
But we're not doing that.
No, we're probably just going to watch the Predator. Also, I highly doubt they're going to make enough of these to make another trilogy.
You never know.
I don't know, but I can doubt. Right? And I think that covers everything for Expanded Universe.
Yeah. Pretty sure.
All right, so we have one email we want to respond to here from regular Blake 7 Zenith correspondent Sergeant Drano. The subject line is triple play Dark Disney X-Men The Neverending Story and Scream. Pretty short email. Hey guys, still catching up, still enjoying your podcast. Too bad you guys didn't like The Neverending Story. I think the first one still holds up quite well. Racing Snail Guy is also in Blake 7. My wife and I are both big fans of...
Deep Roy, sorry, I always say that. I always get his names mixed up.
My wife and I are both big fans of both the book and the first movie. I don't see the end of the movie as being contrary to the vision of the book because Bastion's vengeance against the bullies could be seen as his first step down the dark path that he takes in the second half of the book. Sure. I don't remember much about the second movie other than that it wasn't very good, and I don't think I ever saw the third. Yeah, well, don't watch the third.
The book is still amazing. I mean, the book is, even now after having read hundreds of books in like the past couple of years, God, the book still holds up. One of my top 5, one of my favorite books ever written. So,
Keon should totally stick with the X-Men cartoon series. I dare say that the series, more than anything else, is what put X-Men on the map for most people, and what got us to the movies later. It looks like the series as a whole does generally follow the same overarching plot lines as the comic series.
Yeah, I did. I stuck with it for a while. I watched like 5 episodes, and
then you gave up.
Then I gave up, but I'll go back to it at some point. I liked what I watched. I don't know why I stopped watching it. I was just doing other stuff, I guess.
I don't think Disney ever made an R-rated movie under the Disney banner, but a rather dark entry you guys should check out is Disney's The Black Hole, featuring evil robots with freaking spinning blades that cut into people's chests and jack up their guts. Possibly the darkest Disney movie I've ever seen. Good stuff. I think that's in response to our conversation about Disney owning Miramax and releasing a lot of R-rated movies under Miramax.
Yep.
I also recommend you add the Scream trilogy to your list. First three would work quite well as an ongoing trilogy, even playing around with that meta of what a trilogy does. Sergeant Trainer Station 7 The Door. It's probably on the list somewhere. We typically only decide what trilogy we're watching next, like the month before we record it. Like we just decided before we recorded this episode what we're going to watch next.
Right.
Which, by the way, is the first three Rocky movies. Because Creed comes out.
Thanks for stealing my thunder.
In November. Yeah, well, we always announce it. I love
saying what the movies are.
Yeah, well,
at the
you can
end
still
of the
say it,
episode.
but we always say it before we get to the end now anyway.
Do you know what you just ruined for me?
Yeah, I do, and that's why I did it. You can email us at thedecorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Predator, so we can read them out in our next episode, in which we will be watching the fourth Predator movie. Hopefully, that's the plan anyway. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Play at Triple Play. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook. Trust your doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And as Dylan just spoiled, we're watching the first three Rocky movies 2 months from now. But, as we also just said, we're watching The Predator next. But until then, the end.